Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to whatever time zone you are in, guys. And my topic for today is entitled Firebase and Angular, the pen and paper of front-end development. A little introduction about myself. I am Stephen Vinuya. I'm currently a senior developer here at Cognizant Softvision. And I'm a Microsoft MVP for developers technology here in the Philippines. I also lead one of the Angular community or Angular PH here in the Philippines. And below are my websites, which I have blogs on it, and email if you want to contact me. Now, let's move on to my inspiration why I did this particular talk or topic, or why I found Firebase. I'm a front-end developer for 4 years already. And as a front-end focused developer, I have a little knowledge to what back-end development is. For all I know, back-end developers will only give us their Swagger JSONs once we're done with the endpoint that they're doing. And then we will implement the services for that Swagger JSON that they provide to us. And I also know that back-end and front-end only communicates via response and request in the RESTful API pattern. As a 4-year experienced developer, I am very confident with my skills that time. So I decided to take some side hustles or side projects to maximize the time that I have. But the problem here is most of the side project requires one-man team, meaning I will be both doing the front-end and back-end development of the same website. But that didn't stop me. So I started doing some side projects. Having limited knowledge in back-end development, I tried experimenting different technology stack. I tried Angular plus Laravel. I tried Angular plus .NET Core. I also tried Angular plus AWS Amplify, by which that time AWS Amplify was only introduced freshly. So there's a little bit of community to explore. And also, I tried Angular and Firebase. So for me, developing in Angular and Firebase is the most convenient way for me to develop when I'm doing side projects, since it's a lot faster and also it's scalable as well. So I found love doing Angular and Firebase because it is much faster, and you can easily earn money when you finish developing the side projects that you have. So now let's move forward to what Firebase is. So Firebase is a mobile and web application development platform, which is developed by a company named Firebase Incorporation in 2011. But now, as of today, it was acquired by Google in 2014. So that's why Firebase now is a Google-owned company. And it is a cloud infrastructure that offers hosting, serverless functions, database, file storage, and as well as analytics. So now you might be wondering, what is the difference between GCP and Firebase, since they are both cloud infrastructure of Google? And for Microsoft, we have Azure. For Amazon, we have AWS. And for Google, we have two, Firebase and GCP, or Google Cloud Platform. So how these two differ to each other? For GCP, as you can see here, GCP contains many services or tools you'll ever need to build your complete ecosystem for a medium to large enterprise project. Some of the services you may or may not need during your development. But for Firebase, as we can see here, contains minimal services to build an application. So it's like Firebase have cherry pick each of the services that you will ever need to build a minimal or a bare minimum application. So if I were to compare Firebase and GCP, Firebase represents the 8 Crayola box, which has the basic colors that you need to do your art assignment. While for GCP, it is the 200 pieces crayon box, which has almost all the colors that you may or may not need to do your art assignment. So now, I'm going to show to you or demo to you the sample project that I did for this particular session that we have. So I'm going to give you 15 seconds to screenshot or navigate to this particular URL. So as you can see above, we have the manage-moto.web.app. This is the demo app. And below is the repository, the open source repository that I made for this particular project. So 15 seconds. Okay, so now let's move towards the demo. So this particular app is a Trello clone app. So why did I choose Trello to clone for this particular session? Because I really love Trello. It has been with me for the important times of my life, especially in my wedding. We use Trello, me and my wife, to manage our wedding. And now that I'm being a father, we're also using Trello to manage our baby needs, what things to buy for before our baby comes out. So as you can see here, let's move forward to the app. Once you click login, we have a basic Google account authentication. So I'm going to select my account. And just like Trello, we have boards for this particular project. So we can try to add a board. Let's say, for example, programmers week speaker guides. So let's pick the color purple since it represents the programmer's suite color. So there we have it. And we can try to click for this one. It's color purple. Let's add some lists just like Trello. Let's say to do. Let's say let's call this important. Let's say done. So let's try to add the card. Let's say the card is Zoom background. Then let's say please use these pictures as background for your presentation. Then let's add a photo. Let's select one of the backgrounds that I'm using right now. So this one, and let's create a card. Okay. And now we have the card created. So let's say this particular card should be important. So let's put it in important. And we can also drag the list. So let's say, for example, this particular important card should be on front since it's an important list. And also you can navigate or search your boards here. So all the boards that you have, you can also filter out cards. So you can type filter query here. It will filter out the cards. And also you can invite other users to join into your board. So let's say, for example, I will ask my other account to join, and let's invite the user. And let's wait. Okay. Once you have invited an account, the account that was invited will receive an email notification, just like Trello, that the user that invited you and the board that you was invited into. So something like that. And you can also try to jump to other boards. We have many boards here. So let's try to jump to admin site. Okay, so that's it. That's it for the demo. You can try the link for the demo. You can also sort the list that we have in the site. And there's also a loading screen for this one. And it's also a PWA website, so you can install it on your phone. Let's say, for example, you want to use it as your project management tool. So you can install it in your phone and you can access it anytime in your home screen. And yep, so let's move the to-do here and let's move forward. So that's the demo, or that's the app that I did using Firebase and Angular. And next step that we're going to do is we're going to try, and I'm going to show to you how can you create your Firebase project. So you can try to navigate to console.firebase.google.com. So once you're there, you will see a screen like this. Then what I want you to do is to click Add Project. Next is to choose the name that you want for your application. So as you have noticed here, once the name that you have chosen is already existing with other application, Google Firebase will add a random characters on front of your desired name of the project. But if you have entered a unique name, it won't add any random characters. So let's go for Manage Moto. Then let's hit Continue. Next is it's going to ask you if you want to enable Google Analytics for your Firebase project. For us, we're going to enable Analytics. So let's hit Continue again. And next, it will ask you what account should you use for your analytics project. So let's select the default account for Firebase. And next, now you are created, or you have created your project. Now, once we have created our project, let's try to navigate to see what was inside our Firebase project. So here, let's click for the newly created project, which is Manage Moto. And as we can see here on the side, these are the services that is being offered by Firebase. We have authentication for our user pool and sign-in methods. We have Firestore for our database. We have real-time database, which is quite old. The new database is the Firestore. And we have also storage for storing your file. We have hosting for deploying your application. We have functions for the serverless function and also machine learning. So let's try to look for authentication. So authentication contains the user pool. For AWS, this is the AWS Cognito. For Azure, this is the Azure AD, or the user pool for Azure. And as you can see here, here are the list of users that we have in the system. You can click for sign-in method. So Google Firebase offers a lot of variety of sign-in methods that you can ever think of. So you can settle for the usual email and password authentication. For me, I'm using also Google, which is the Google Auth that I showed you in the demo app. You can also phone authentication, Facebook, and there's a lot more type of authentication that you can use for your Firebase application. Now for Firestore Firebase, Firestore database, for Firestore, they are calling the tables in relational database term as collection. And each row and columns that we used to call in our relational database is called documents. And we have also storage for storing our images for the cards that we upload. So you can see here, we have all the images that was uploaded by our users. And also hosting, which manages the domain that we have and also the hosting. So as you can see here, you can add custom domain that you can link in your Firebase application. You can try to add your custom domain and your functions. So for the functions, these are the serverless function or some Node API that you can upload to your project. So for now, let's try to create a new application to our Firebase project. So a Firebase project can support multiple applications, whether it's iOS, it's Android, it's web, or Unity, if you are a game developer. So for us, we're going to select web. Let's going to say manage Moto web app. And let's try to register the application. So once you have registered the application, Firebase will give you some steps or guidelines for you to set up your application or your web application. So for this one, as you can see, Firebase tells you to copy this particular Firebase config for you to set up. So for our Angular application, we're going to copy this one. So let's hit copy. And let's move now towards to our Angular application. Assuming that you have set up already your Angular application. So the first thing you will do is to go to the environments file and simply paste the configuration that you have copied that we will use later. So for this one, we're going to paste this configuration so that we can set up our Firebase application in our Angular app. So once you have pasted that here in our environments, we will now move into installing the necessary libraries that we need for our development, especially we're doing Angular. So you only need 2 libraries to be installed in your Angular application. You need the Angular Fire, which has the SDK available for Angular specification that connects to the Firebase database. And also you need the Firebase node module as well. So once you have installed that, let's move forward to installing as well the Firebase CLI. So Firebase CLI is necessary for you to set up the Angular project for Firebase and as well to deploy your application. So we need this for deploying the application via CLI and also setting up our project. So once you have installed that, you can now try to initiate Firebase Login. So you can authenticate yourself via Firebase. So when you tried Firebase Login, let's say Firebase Login. So you can see here, I'm already logged in. But when I try to log out, let's try to log out. I'm going to show you what login looks like. So let's try to log out to our Firebase console or CLI. So I'm now logged out. Let's try to log in. When you try to Firebase login, it will open a Chrome or browser screen, and it will ask you what account should you log into your Firebase console or CLI. And it will say the necessary things that it will administer to your CLI. So you just click allow, and you're now logged in. Next step, once you are logged in into your Firebase, you can now initialize the Angular application to use Firebase. So to initialize our Angular application, once you're in the Angular application, you just hit Firebase init. So Firebase initialize. And the next is once you hit Firebase init, it will prompt you which services should you set up your Angular application. So for us, we're going to use Firestore for our database. We're going to use as well, we're going to use as well functions for the Node API type of services. And we're going to use hosting and storage for storing our files. So once you're set up with that, and also we have installed the necessary NPM modules in our application, you can now go to your app module to bootstrap or initialize Firebase in your Angular app. So you only need this particular line. So you need the Angular Fire module from the Angular Fire NPM package that we have installed. So you can say Angular Fire module initialized app, and we're going to pass the Firebase config that we have copied earlier. So this is the only line of code that you'll ever need to set up your Firebase in your Angular application. Next is once you're set up, let's now try to create a data service or an asynchronous service to connect to your database. So let's first define the model that we're going to use. So for Trello, we have boards. So obviously we have a board interface or a board model to define the structure of our transactions. And of course, after that is we're going to define the asynchronous services or the data services that we need. So I said here that just like table name for RDMS, we're calling the table name for Firestore as collection name. Then we want to inject our Angular Firestore service in our constructor for us to use. Then if we want to create a record, we can simply say Angular Firestore, what collection name should we add that particular board or object. And also if we want to get a particular board, Angular Firestore, what collection name, and what particular ID are we wanting to get. If we want to delete, we're saying Angular, what collection name, and what particular ID, and the delete function. So it's pretty straightforward, nothing complex to render. And also, we have update. So Angular's Firestore also handles patch updates. So you don't have to post or put all of the objects to update. So you just need to use the merge through option to accept the partial object update. So you can basically say that you want to update the name of the board. You just need to pass the ID and the name, then you can update the board name. And also, Firestore can handle some queries. So let's say, for example, you're looking for a board that is created by a user ID. So you can basically query where user ID equals what user ID you want to find that particular board. And also, you can try to do some complex querying. Let's say, for example, you have an array property and you want to see if that particular array contains that particular user ID. So now, you might be wondering that there's really no backend application in our setup. So we're basically communicating directly to Firebase or Firestore to add our database records. So how does security, or how can we impose security measures if we're going to transact directly from front end to database without going to back end? So that's that's where Firestore rules come into play. So Firestore rule is just like a JavaScript syntax code where you can impose some rules before the user can transact to your database. So let's say, for example, we have a function here is signed in. So the requestor should not have a null value in his authentication header. And also we have a check if user. So we're checking if the data that we have in the database does have the same user ID as the requestor. We also have the check board if owner. So we're checking if the board user ID is the same as the requestor UID. So let's try to look for some example here. So let's say, for example, board. For boards, the user cannot create or read if he or she is not signed in. So he or she can only create or read board if he is signed into the system. And next, we can try to set, we can also allow users to delete or write only if he is signed in, and as well, if he or she is the owner of that particular board, then he can create or delete the board that he has created. And as well, we can only allow read if the user is signed into our system. So in this part, the Firestore rule, this is the part where we set up the security measures that we want for our database. Because when we're transacting directly from front end to database, there should be a risk or potential risk for security breach. So Firebase has implemented this Firestore rule for you to implement the rules to secure your database. Now next, now that we are secured to our Firestore using Firestore rules, there are transactions that isn't only about database, that we need a back-end application for it. Let's say, for example, an email notification. So email notification, obviously, a front-end application cannot fully handle doing an email notification. So that's where Firestore Cloud Function comes into play. So Firestore Cloud Function is a serverless application. As you can see here, once you have set up your Firebase initialize, it will create a functions folder that where you can see we have the index.js where you can set up your services that you want to your application. Let's say, for example, I want to notify the newly added users to the board. So we're going to listen to the board's Firestore, and once a certain record on the board has updated, we're going to read that particular record. So we're going to get the data, the board now, the updated data. Then we're going to get the before updated data. Then we're going to check if there's a change in the user. So if the newly updated data has the more users in length, then obviously there's a newly invited user. So we're going to get the inviter record. Then after that, we're going to filter which user is added. So which user ID is the newly added user. And we're going to look it to send an email, to send a welcome email for each user. So this part. So we're going to send an email for the users that are newly added to our board. So now, that's when you can do some backend functionality. And also, this is not only limited to listening to Firestore changes. You can also use these particular cloud functions for doing some API services or RESTful microservices as well. But in our case, we're only using it for listening to changes for Firestore so that we can send an email notification. So next, now that we have catered front-end development, we have catered the security for the database that we're transacting to front-end, and also we have catered some back-end functionality that cannot be catered by front-end, like email notification. The next step to fully build our application is we should also have a CI/CD, or continuous integration or continuous development. And for that, it's really easy to do CI/CD for Firebase and Angular, since we just have some basic steps to follow. Let's say, for example, we just only need to run npm install to install the dependency. We just need to build the project. And after we have built the project for Angular, we just need to publish that particular artifact. And next, for deployment, since we are using Firebase Cli, so we can simply say deploy what particular service you want to deploy. If it is it the function, the cloud function, or the hosting, which is the front-end application. So as you can see here, if you want to deploy your application via CI/CD, you need to get the Firebase token. So it is one of the security measures, since you will initialize your Firebase CLI in the GitHub actions. So you need some security measures to identify that you're the particular user that is going to deploy that particular command. So for that, you can Firebase have already anticipated that particular scenario. So Firebase has an option which is Firebase Login CI, which is Firebase Login Continuous Integration, wherein when you do Firebase Login CI, it will ask you to log in again. And in return, once you have authenticated successfully, it will give you the Firebase token that we need. So this particular Firebase token is the one that we need for doing CI or CD, whether it's GitHub, it's GitLab, it's Bitbucket, it's Azure DevOps. So we need this particular CI/CD token. So once you have get your particular CI/CD token, you can now navigate to your repository. So let's go to our repository, and as you can see here, go to the settings, go to secrets, and under secrets, you can see here that you can add a new repository token. So you can create a repository token for your CI/CD deployment, and you can add the value for this one. And as you can see here, we have already added our CI/CD token, which is the Firebase token, which is reference to our CI/CD file. And once you have successfully set up your Firebase app, you can see that it's already set up here. We have the build and deploy pipeline already up and running. So yeah, I think that's it. Let's go back to the slide. Yep, that's it. Basically, I just showcased to you what is it for Firebase and Angular setup, and how can you basically set up it for a full blown application, so you can basically cater all the database transaction, security, the cloud services or cloud functions, and as well as the CI/CD, with just having a minimal setup or code that you need. So if you have any questions for me, I'm free to answer it now.
Maybe you can wrap up the talk already if there are no questions from the audience.
Okay, so I will wrap up the talk by this saying. So success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. And that concludes my talk for today. And thank you very much for listening and have a nice day, everyone.